Beneath the Cambodian jungle's canopy in 1967, darkness cloaked the air like a stifling blanket, pierced only by faint moonlight threading through leafy gaps. A U.S. Special Forces recon team, silent specters of war, moved cautiously through treacherous terrain. Their mission was not for the faint-hearted. Steal a North Vietnamese supply truck on the Ho Chi Minh Trail, the enemy's lifeline fueling their war machine. This was no ordinary raid, no high school football skirmish. The truck was key, undeniable proof of communist forces brazenly violating international law by operating in neutral Cambodia. Success could sway Prince Sihanouk to align with the U.S., choking the enemy's supply line and shifting the war's tide. But in this dense jungle, where insect hums blended with wind hissing through ancient trees, something waited, something not of this human world. The team, part of SOGS, Studies and Observations Group, an elite unit operating in the Vietnam War's shadows, was led by Sergeant Jake Miller, a weathered Texan from the prairie. Jake, with sun-bleached hair and eyes sharp as knives, carried a Zippo lighter etched with Fort Bragg or Bust, a nod to grueling training days in North Carolina. He was the type to calmly eat a terrible MRE turkey ration mid-firefight, joking it was better than gas station sandwiches back home. Beside him were trusted brothers, each a piece of America. Mike Sullivan, a quick-witted Chicago gunner, diffused tension with quips about MREs worse than frozen pizza. Tom Nguyen, Vietnamese-American and Fort Benning paratrooper, brought keen insight into local language and culture. Brian O'Malley, a Boston sniper, spun tales of drive-in horror flicks, swearing, "Nothing's scarier than running out of popcorn mid-movie." They wore no U.S. uniforms, no familiar M16s. Instead, the team donned gray-green North Vietnamese fatigues, spoils from a prior ambush, still faintly reeking of gunpowder and sweat. They gripped stolen AK-47s, cold and alien but vital for their disguise. Moving in a dispersed formation, they glided like phantoms, each step measured to avoid snapping twigs. They knew a single misstep, a stray sound, could turn the jungle into their grave. The air pressed heavy, as if squeezing their chests. Sweat trickled down foreheads, mingling with camouflage paint. Over the radio, Jake's voice cut through, low and steady, a beacon in the storm. "Stay silent. Don't let Charlie hear." LZ's half a mile out. Pale moonlight cast silver streaks, illuminating thick foliage and conjuring eerie, shifting shapes. Unease crept into each man, though none dared voice it. Tom, at the point, froze, raising a hand to halt. His eyes locked on the darkness ahead, where trees seemed to whisper secrets. A foul stench, not of jungle beasts or damp earth, wafted through, prickling their necks. It was decay, but with an unnatural edge, almost otherworldly. Mike, just behind, tried to ease the tension with his usual humor. "Probably a lost McDonald's burger." His voice was hushed, but no one laughed. Mike's forced grin faded as he noticed the jungle's unnatural silence. The incessant insect chorus, a constant backdrop, had stopped. Only the wind remained, and something else. A low, barely audible sound, like heavy breathing from afar. Jake, honed by years in the field, sensed danger. He tightened his grip on the AK-47, finger hovering near the trigger. The mission had been meticulously planned at base. Maps scrawled with ink, briefings stretching past midnight. But no one warned them about this jungle, the sensation of being watched, as if the trees themselves tracked their steps. Tom, sharpened by a childhood steeped in Vietnamese folklore, shook his head. He recalled his grandmother's tales of preta, ravenous spirits wandering forests with glowing red eyes and razor claws. He tried to dismiss the thought, but his gaze stayed fixed on the dark, as if expecting something to emerge. The Cambodian jungle wasn't just a battlefield. It was another realm where the line between reality and the supernatural grew thin. The recon team knew their enemy wasn't only North Vietnamese soldiers with AK-47s and guerrilla tactics. Something older, crueler lurked in the shadows, and as they pressed deeper into the forest's heart, each step drew them closer to a secret none were prepared to face. Deep in the Cambodian jungle, the SOG's recon team crept south, each step a countdown to their target. The Ho Chi Minh Trail, a meticulously maintained gravel artery where enemy trucks rolled ceaselessly, laden with weapons and supplies. Their mission, to steal one of those trucks, sounded insane, but for Sergeant Jake Miller and his team, insanity was the thrill. The plan? Jake had shrugged, his eyes glinting like they did recounting high school football days in Texas. Charge in, hit hard, and hope God's watching. But this jungle wasn't a gridiron. It was a labyrinth of darkness, every leaf concealing a threat, every sound a potential death knell. Under dim moonlight, the team moved in a dispersed formation. North Vietnamese uniforms clinging to their bodies, stolen AK-47s cold in their hands. Sweat soaked the camouflage paint on their faces, mingling with dirt and unspoken fear. Jake, his Fort Bragg or bust Zippo, tucked tightly in a pocket, led with the calm of a man who'd stared down death before. Mike Sullivan, Chicago's nimble gunner, slipped through brush with the finesse of a kid who'd dodged cops in his old neighborhood. Brian O'Malley, Boston's sniper with drive-in horror tales, held the rear, eyes scanning the dark like night vision goggles. Tom Nguyen, Vietnamese-American with deep terrain knowledge, took point, his ears attuned to the jungle's every whisper. They neared the Ho Chi Minh Trail, where the target truck could appear any moment. But the jungle, its interwoven canopy like a giant spider web, seemed to murmur warnings. An unease clung, as if the earth itself urged them to turn back. Then a sharp sound sliced the night, machetes hacking wood mixed with low Vietnamese voices. Just dozens of yards away, a group of North Vietnamese soldiers cleared a path through the brush, their AK-47s glinting faintly. The team's hearts froze. Mike and Brian at the front dropped low, bodies pressed to the ground, breaths ragged. Jake, a few meters off, signaled with a razor-sharp glance, ordering them to take cover. Through leaf gaps, they saw three figures approach, rifles ready but unsuspecting, as if the jungle were their backyard. Hidden in the brush, the team melded with the dark, only their pounding pulses audible. Mike, with a street kid's survival instinct, fought to stay calm, his mind flashing to a scene from Apocalypse Now, snuck into a Chicago theater. But this wasn't a movie. Each second, the three enemies drew closer, mere steps away. Their tattered boots crunched dry leaves, a faint sound but deafening in the jungle's hush. Tom, sharpest with terrain, felt a dry twig underfoot. He tried to shift, but too late. A crisp snap rang out, a thunderclap in the silent night. The three North Vietnamese spun, rifles aimed, eyes flashing in the dark. No time for hesitation. Mike, reflexes honed at Fort Benning, raised his AK-47, finger squeezing the trigger. A burst tore the air, dropping the first enemy before he could shout. Brian, lightning fast, fired next, his bullet piercing the second's chest. The third raised his rifle, but Jake, from cover, landed a precise shot, ending him. Gunfire echoed through the jungle, shattering the silence like a curse unleashed. Blood stained the earth, pooling under moonlight, but thankfully not the teams. They lived, but at the cost of precious silence. The jungle awoke, and the enemy was surely coming. Jake, eyes icy, barked into the radio, his voice low but commanding, a general on the battlefield. "We're blown. Drag the bodies to the brush, now." The team moved like a machine, each knowing their role. Mike and Brian hauled the corpses into the undergrowth, covering them with leaves and branches to erase traces. Tom, hands slightly trembling, double-checked the area, ensuring no clues remained. But the weight of danger pressed hard. Those shots weren't just a skirmish. They were an invitation to a North Vietnamese army lurking in the dark. Jake scanned the jungle, moonlight carving his rugged features, a soldier who'd seen too much. He knew stealing the truck was now secondary. Survival was paramount. With a firm nod, Jake signaled a retreat to the initial rally point, a clearing a few hundred meters away. They moved fast but cautious, each step a battle between speed and stealth. The jungle, already menacing, seemed alive now. Trees swayed without wind, and that foul stench from before wafted again, prickling their necks. No one spoke, but their eyes met, fraught with doubt and fear. Was it just North Vietnamese soldiers? Or did this jungle hide something else? Something even the toughest warriors weren't trained to face? Beneath the feeble silver moonlight, the U.S. Special Forces recon team slipped back to their initial insertion point, a kidney-shaped clearing a few hundred meters from the Ho Chi Minh Trail. The brief firefight, though victorious, left an invisible scar on their minds. The echo of gunfire lingered, a warning that this Cambodian jungle forgave no mistakes. They moved swiftly but cautiously, boots treading lightly on dry leaves, striving not to alert the enemy, or whatever lurked in the dark. Reaching the clearing, the team set up a loose defensive perimeter, rifles outward, eyes scanning every shadowed tree. Sergeant Jake Miller, his gaze sharp as a blade, knelt on one knee, gripping the stolen AK-47, ready for any threat. But in this jungle, danger wasn't confined to North Vietnamese soldiers. The air hung heavy, pressing against their chests. The incessant insect chorus filled the night, but something else wove into it. A faint, persistent hiss, like the breath of an unseen creature echoing from afar. It wasn't the wind through leaves or any jungle beast. Tom Nguyen, most attuned to the forest's mysteries, froze, eyes locked on the darkness ahead. As a Vietnamese American raised on his grandmother's folklore, he sensed something beyond this world. He recalled tales of Preta, ravenous spirits wandering sacred lands with glowing red eyes and claws like knives, hunting those who trespassed. In that moment, he felt their gaze, as if countless invisible eyes bored into his soul. Jake, with the pragmatism of a Fort Bragg veteran, noticed Tom's tension. Frowning, he tried to keep the team focused. To him, the jungle was just another battlefield where enemies could be soldiers, traps, or fatigue. Even Jake, who scoffed at ghost stories around campfires, couldn't deny the unseen weight enveloping them. It was like being watched, as if the jungle wasn't just a place but a living entity with thousands of eyes hidden in the trees. Each gust of wind made branches sway, whispering, and that foul stench from before wafted again, raising the team's hackles. Over the radio, they contacted their command pilot, Lieutenant Fred Carter, circling in a command helicopter at a safe altitude. Carter's steady voice, honed at Travis Air Force Base, crackled through, bearing grim news. His tone, usually calm, betrayed worry. Heavy vehicle movement was detected on the Ho Chi Minh Trail, possibly an entire North Vietnamese battalion with armored units and heavy firepower. "You need to move fast," Carter warned, as if time were a luxury they'd run out of. But the radio sputtered with interference, static laced with strange murmurs, like unintelligible whispers. Mike Sullivan, Chicago's Cavalier gunner, tried to lighten the mood, joking about radio batteries dying at the worst time, like the Air Force forgot to charge them for a Hilton camping trip. His grin faded as the static grew harsher, as if something deliberately jammed their link to the outside world. Suddenly, from the distant tree line, a towering figure flickered past, too swift for eyes to track. At least 10 feet tall, its gaunt, unnatural form moved silently, as if not touching the ground. Brian O'Malley, the hawk-eyed Boston sniper, snapped his rifle up, finger trembling on the trigger. But Jake, with a commander's reflexes, signaled to lower the weapon. He didn't want them wasting ammo on what might be a mirage. The jungle's stifling heat and relentless stress could make anyone see phantoms. "The forest messes with your head," Jake told himself, trying to stay grounded. But Tom's eyes, wide with fear and certainty, told another story. He recalled his grandmother's warnings about Preta, cursed spirits with blood-red eyes and razor claws, always starving for the souls of the living. "They don't just hunt animals," she'd said. "They hunt those who enter where they don't belong." Mike, despite his bravado, couldn't hide his unease. He'd once quipped that Preta sounded like Vietnam's Bigfoot, hoping to spark laughter as he did on long camp nights. But now, no one laughed. The faint hiss sounded again, closer, as if whatever it was drew nearer. An unnatural chill cut through the muggy air. Trees swayed, casting warped shadows on the ground, as if the jungle lived, watched, waited. Jake gripped his AK-47, knuckles white. He didn't believe in ghosts, but he trusted his instincts, and they screamed that they weren't just hunted by soldiers. Something older, crueler, moved in the dark, and it knew they were here. As the team fortified their position, each felt the jungle's weight, as if it squeezed them bit by bit. The mission to steal the truck, though critical, now seemed secondary. The priority was surviving the night, the jungle, and the invisible eyes watching from the shadows. The Cambodian jungle, with its interwoven canopy like an endless net, seemed to tighten around the American Special Forces reconnaissance team with every step. The first skirmish had left an invisible scar. The sound of gunfire still haunted their minds, a reminder that this forest never slept. The mission to seize the truck on the Ho Chi Minh Trail remained the objective, but the path they had just traversed was marked by blood and peril. Sergeant Jake Miller, with the steely gaze of a soldier who had faced death before, ordered the team to try a different route, a narrower path cutting through the jungle to reach the enemy's gravel road. They moved silently, their North Vietnamese uniforms clinging to their bodies, stolen AK-47s cold in their hands, each man carrying a piece of America, from Jake's Texas plains to the bustling Chicago streets of Mike Sullivan. The team crossed a narrow clearing, the grass knee-high, moonlight casting faint silver streaks across the ground. Tom Nguyen, with the keen instincts of someone raised on Vietnamese folktales, led the way, his eyes scanning every shadow as if sensing the forest's breath. Mike followed close behind, his steps light but tense, gripping his rifle tightly, trying to banish fear with memories of McDonald's burgers back home. Brian O'Malley, the Boston sniper, brought up the rear, his hawk-like eyes ever ready to spot danger. Jake, at the tail, held command, his gaze never leaving the team, like a father shielding his children in a storm. They pressed forward, cautious yet swift, each step a gamble with fate. The jungle seemed to watch, its branches swaying without wind, and a familiar, putrid stench like the one from before wafted through, making the team's hair stand on end. Then, suddenly, from the far side of the clearing, 10 figures emerged, AK-47s at the ready. North Vietnamese soldiers, in the same gray-green uniforms as the recon team, stepped out from the tree line, their cold eyes sweeping the area. Both sides froze, the air taut as a bowstring. The recon team's hearts pounded, but their disguised uniforms, taken from a prior ambush, became an unexpected shield. In that moment, the enemy mistook them for allies. Tom, with reflexes honed by years of living between two worlds, acted instantly. He stepped forward, shoulders squared, eyes commanding like a true North Vietnamese officer. In fluent Vietnamese, he ordered his team to gather firewood, a mundane command but enough to deceive. Mike and Brian, catching on, bowed their heads, pretending to study a map, hiding their pale, unmistakably American faces. Jake, concealed in the shadows, kept his hand on the trigger, ready to act if the ruse failed. For a few seconds, all seemed well. The enemy soldiers, though suspicious, didn't raise their weapons. They moved on, their eyes gliding over the recon team, as if seeing only familiar comrades. But fate was not so forgiving. One enemy soldier, tall and lanky with eyes sharp as knives, paused, staring at Brian too long. Perhaps it was the moonlight glinting off his pale skin, or a careless moment when Brian looked up. Whatever the reason, the soldier's gaze turned icy, his hand tightening on his rifle. Tom sensed the danger, his eyes meeting Jake's for a split second. Without a word, the recon team moved like a machine. Mike raised his AK-47, the first burst of gunfire tearing through the air, dropping 2 enemy soldiers before they could react. Brian, with a sniper's reflexes, fired next, each shot as precise as a blade. Jake, from the rear, unleashed the final rounds, finishing the rest. In seconds, 10 enemy soldiers lay dead on the grass, their blood pooling red under the moonlight. But victory came at a cost. One enemy soldier, before collapsing, managed to fire back. A grenade launched from his rifle arced upward, exploding overhead, its shrapnel raining down like steel. The recon team ducked low, metal fragments whistling through the air, embedding into the surrounding trees. Jake, with a commander's instinct, shouted into the radio, his voice cutting through the blast. "RT Bravo, we're under attack. Request immediate support." The distant roar of helicopters answered, a flicker of hope amid despair. But the jungle, as if awakened by blood and gunpowder, suddenly came alive in a terrifying way. From the distant tree line, a strange figure appeared closer than ever before. It stood motionless, at least 10 feet tall, its gaunt frame unnatural like a distorted shadow. Its glowing red eyes burned in the darkness, unblinking, like twin embers from hell. Mike, still trembling from the firefight, aimed his rifle at it, his breath ragged. But before he could pull the trigger, the figure vanished, as if dissolving into the air, leaving a chilling silence. Jake, though skeptical of the supernatural, felt a cold shiver run down his spine. He had once laughed off Brian's horror stories about Bigfoot or late-night Twilight Zone episodes in Boston. But what had just appeared was no jungle hallucination. It was something else, something that didn't belong on this battlefield. The recon team retreated at once, hearts pounding, each man carrying an unspoken question. Was their real enemy the North Vietnamese soldiers, or something far more terrifying lurking in the shadows? The sound of helicopters grew closer, but the jungle seemed unwilling to let them go. The branches swayed, the foul stench rose again, and a faint hiss, like the breath of an invisible creature, echoed from afar. They ran, but couldn't shake the feeling that the forest was watching, waiting, ready to swallow them into its dark heart. In the heart of the Cambodian jungle, where darkness seemed to devour all hope, the American Special Forces reconnaissance team huddled behind a massive termite mound, their hearts pounding on the razor's edge between life and death. The recent skirmish had thrust them into desperation, and the jungle, with its swaying branches whispering curses, seemed to tighten its noose around them. The mission to seize the truck on the Ho Chi Minh Trail now faded before the immediate threat. Dozens of North Vietnamese soldiers closing in, and something mysterious, with glowing red eyes, still lurking in the shadows. But a faint glimmer of hope emerged as the roar of the rescue helicopter, call sign Greyhound 4, echoed from afar, tearing through the night. The helicopter swooped down into a kidney-shaped clearing, its rotors whipping the tall grass, unleashing a whirlwind of dust and leaves. The crew, tense after hours of flying over enemy skies, scanned for the recon team. But a fatal mistake occurred. From the opposite tree line, a group of North Vietnamese soldiers waved, their gray-green uniforms identical to the SOG teams. In the chaotic moment, the crew mistook them for allies. Greyhound 4 touched down, its door flung open, ready to receive American soldiers. But instead of the recon team, the enemy surged forward, AK-47s unleashing a hail of bullets. The sound of metal striking the helicopter's hull rang out like a death knell, shredding its thin steel skin. From their cover behind the termite mound, the recon team watched the horrific scene unfold. Siggy, and SOG gunner, raised his rifle from the shadows, firing back with deadly precision. His bullets tore through the air, dropping several enemy soldiers before they could reach the helicopter. But the enemy's firepower was overwhelming. A round pierced the cockpit, striking pilot James Wilson in the head. Blood sprayed, staining the control panel, his body slumping in the screams of co-pilot John Harper. With the reflexes of a seasoned soldier, Harper seized the controls, shouting in desperation, ordering takeoff. Greyhound 4 lurched upward, its rotors slicing through the canopy, leaving broken branches falling in its wake. The helicopter vanished into the night, abandoning the recon team in despair, without a word of explanation. Jake Miller, with the icy gaze of a commander, ordered the team to fortify their position. They huddled behind the mound, rifles aimed outward, ready to face the enemy's onslaught. Dozens of North Vietnamese soldiers poured from the jungle, crawling through the tall grass, their figures like specters under the moonlight. Mike Sullivan, the Chicago gunner, loaded his weapon with trembling hands, trying to banish fear with visions of the Alamo, a battle he'd studied in high school. But this was no history lesson, this was reality, and this jungle had no place for surviving heroes. Tom Nguyen, with his sharp eyes, scanned the tree line, searching for any sign of hope. Brian O'Malley, the Boston sniper, held his position, finger poised on the trigger, but his eyes were filled with doubt after what they'd witnessed. Suddenly, a strange, low, chilling hiss echoed, closer than ever before. It wasn't the wind or a jungle beast, but the breath of an invisible entity. Before the team could react, an enemy soldier crawling through the grass screamed, his body yanked violently into the underbrush. The sound of snapping bones rang out, sharp and final, then silence. The team froze, their eyes meeting in horror. Jake shook his head, trying to keep them focused, but his instincts screamed that this jungle hid something far beyond enemy soldiers. The towering figure, at least 10 feet tall, seen before, now seemed to move closer, flickering in the darkness. From above, the roar of gunships, Mad Dog 3 and 4, tore through the sky, bringing ferocious firepower. They dove, unleashing rounds into the tree line, cutting down dozens of North Vietnamese soldiers in seconds. Grass and earth erupted, gunpowder smoke mingling with the stench of blood. But Air Force pilot Robin Taylor, flying a Cessna overhead, realized a horrifying truth. This wasn't a small patrol. It was an entire enemy base. Hundreds of North Vietnamese soldiers with armored vehicles were converging from the Ho Chi Minh Trail just a few hundred meters away. And amid the life-or-death struggle, Robin saw something inexplicable, a colossal figure moving like the wind, charging through the enemy ranks. Screams of terror erupted as some soldiers vanished into the darkness, as if swallowed by an unseen force. The recon team, hunkered behind the termite mound, felt the presence of that thing, though none dared look directly. The hiss sounded again, closer, like a warning. Jake gripped his rifle, his eyes fixed on the tree line. He didn't believe in demons, but he believed in survival. And in that moment, amid the gunpowder and blood, he knew their greatest enemy might not be the North Vietnamese soldiers, but something lurking in the jungle's heart, watching them with glowing red eyes and an insatiable hunger. The Cambodian jungle, with its interwoven canopy like an endless net, had become a natural prison trapping the American Special Forces reconnaissance team. Only 7 survivors remained, huddled behind a massive termite mound, their bodies exhausted, their minds taut as bowstrings. The bloody clash with North Vietnamese soldiers had claimed their comrades, blood soaking the forest floor, and the hope of seizing the truck on the Ho Chi Minh Trail had vanished like gunpowder smoke. Sergeant Jake Miller, though wounded in the leg, held firm as commander, his steely gaze sweeping the clearing where the enemy lurked. But in the darkness, a greater threat, with glowing red eyes, seemed to wait, watching their every breath. Jake, with dried blood caked on his North Vietnamese uniform, gripped the radio, his voice hoarse as he shouted for help. But the radio answered only with static, as if the jungle deliberately severed them from the outside world. Mike Sullivan, blood dripping from a shoulder wound, loaded his weapon with trembling hands, his eyes flashing the defiance of a Chicago kid who'd faced danger on old city streets. Tom Nguyen, pale-faced, leaned against the mound, his lips muttering a Vietnamese prayer, as if seeking protection from ancestral spirits. Brian O'Malley, the Boston sniper, held his AK-47 at the ready, but his eyes kept darting to the tree line, where those red eyes had appeared, like twin embers burning in hell. No one spoke it aloud, but they all felt it. That thing was still there, hiding, watching, waiting. The air was heavy, the atmosphere stifling, mingling with the stench of blood and gunpowder. North Vietnamese soldiers in overwhelming numbers continued crawling through the tall grass, their figures like specters under the silver moonlight. The recon team fired back, bursts of gunfire tearing through the night, but they knew they couldn't hold out long. Suddenly, a deep, chilling roar echoed from the jungle's heart. It wasn't a helicopter, nor a wild beast, but a verdict from some ancient force. The North Vietnamese, once ferocious, descended into panic. Some dropped their weapons, fleeing into the darkness, their eyes wide with terror. From the clearing, the colossal figure, at least 10 feet tall, appeared again, moving like the wind. It charged through the grass, dragging an enemy soldier into the underbrush. His scream rang out, sharp and desperate, then fell silent as if swallowed by the darkness. Jake, despite the pain from his wound, ordered the team to hold their position, his eyes betraying doubt. He didn't believe in demons, didn't believe in the horror stories Brian used to tell about Bigfoot or the Twilight Zone. But what had just appeared wasn't a hallucination born of wartime stress. It was real, and somehow, strangely, it seemed to be helping them. Was it a jungle spirit, a Cambodian mythical beast, or a product of their exhausted minds? No one knew for sure, and no one dared ask. The recon team clung to the termite mound, praying for a miracle. That miracle came, but not as they expected. The roar of another rescue helicopter tore through the sky. The SOG team, with what strength remained, signaled, the glint of a mirror flashing in the night. The helicopter descended, its rotors whipping grass and earth, and the recon team scrambled aboard, pulling each other into the cabin. Jake, limping from his leg wound, was the last to board, his eyes still fixed on the clearing. As the helicopter lifted off, Mike glanced out the window, his heart pounding. Those red eyes were still there, glowing in the darkness, watching them with eerie calm. Then, in a blink, they vanished, melting into the night as if they'd never existed. The mission failed. The truck, critical evidence that could shift the war's tide, rolled on along the Ho Chi Minh Trail. But the recon team had survived, and that was the only victory they could claim. As the helicopter carried them back to base, each man carried an unspoken question. What had saved them? The North Vietnamese, with their sudden panic, or something far more terrifying that had chosen to spare them that night? The Cambodian jungle kept its secrets, and the recon team, though alive, knew they had touched a world that should not be disturbed. If this story sent chills down your spine, hit the subscribe button to explore more military and supernatural mysteries. Share it with friends, comrades, or anyone who loves war and horror in America. Was it real, or just a hallucination of war? Drop a comment and let's figure it out together. Thank you, and see you in the next story.